the inner crucible, where suffering begins and alchemy awakens. Before there was psychology, before therapy rooms and neuroscience, there were fires. Fires of chaos, fires of breakdown, fires that burned through identity, burned through illusion, burned through everything you thought you were. Ancient alchemists believed that gold could be created from base metal, through fire, through time, through sacred transformation. Carl Jung believed they were describing something much deeper. Not chemistry, but soul work. Jung saw alchemy as a metaphor for inner transformation, a symbolic language for what happens when a human being faces the dark night of the soul. He studied alchemical texts not to decode formulas, but to understand how the psyche transforms through suffering. He realized that the stages of alchemy, Nigredo, Albedo, Rubedo, mapped onto the very process of individuation. Each stage a descent, a purification, a resurrection, not of the body, but of the self. The first stage is Nigredo, the blackening. This is the breakdown, the loss, the confusion. It's when the ego begins to unravel, when life falls apart, when nothing makes sense, when the old identity no longer fits, but the new one hasn't yet arrived. You may feel depressed, disoriented, empty, ashamed, afraid. But Jung would say, this is the necessary burning. The fire doesn't destroy you. It melts what was never real. It breaks down the false gold so that true gold can be revealed. Nigredo is not failure. It is the beginning of transformation. But to move through it, you must stay present in the fire. You must allow yourself to grieve, to sit in silence, to stop running, to listen to the darkness not as punishment, but as a teacher. The soul uses breakdown the way the alchemist uses heat to soften, to loosen, to prepare, because only what has been broken open can be reformed into something new. In our world, we pathologize this darkness. We treat suffering as a glitch, something to fix. But in Jungian psychology, this is a threshold, a rite of passage. Your pain is not meaningless. It is alchemical. You are not falling apart. You are being initiated. An initiation doesn't begin in light. It begins in the dark, where the persona crumbles and the shadow speaks, where the self whispers. This is the first fire. Stay. So ask yourself, what in my life is burning away, not to harm me, but to reveal something deeper? Where am I confusing discomfort with failure instead of transformation? What if this darkness is not a detour, but the beginning of a sacred process? Nigredo hurts, but it also humbles. It strips the surface. It softens the ego. It teaches you to listen differently. And when you no longer resist the darkness, the gold begins to stir beneath the ashes. The light within the ashes. Albedo and the awakening of clarity. After the fire, there is silence. After the breaking, there is space. And from the space that Nigredo leaves behind, something gentle begins to rise. This is Albedo, the whitening. Not the light of triumph, but the light of clarity. It is not loud. It is not proud. It is like moonlight after storm. It is the psyche's quiet breath after it has been stripped of illusion. In Jungian alchemy, Albedo is the moment when the soul begins to see, to reflect, to witness the inner world not through fear, but through symbol. The dream returns. The archetype whispers. The mirror is no longer a threat, it is a guide. You are no longer consumed by chaos, but you are still within the process. Albedo is not the end. It is the reorientation, a moment when the unconscious starts to reveal what it's been holding through images, through insight, through emotional truth. This is when dreams become luminous, when symbols arise from deep places, when you begin to feel something sacred beneath your pain. Not resolution, but meaning. You may dream of white birds, clear water circles, mandalas, spirals, light. These are not accidents. They are reflections of what the soul is reclaiming. Jung wrote, "The albedo means the moonlight stage, the emerging of consciousness from the darkness of unconsciousness." And that emergence is quiet, but profound. In albedo, you begin to feel what was too painful to feel before. You cry not from panic, but from recognition. You begin to name what was once hidden. And more importantly, you begin to forgive. Not others, not yet, but yourself. You soften toward the one who was burned. You speak to your inner child with new language. You stop fixing and start holding. This is when the healing begins to have roots. You're no longer running, you're reclaiming. But Albedo is fragile. If the ego tries to rebuild too quickly, you return to illusion. You begin to perform again. You escape into positivity. You try to move on without metabolizing the lesson. But the alchemical path asks for patience. You are still inside the vessel. The process is not finished. Let the white light settle. Let it wash through your inner world. Let it reflect what is ready to be integrated. This is the sacred pause before the gold appears, becoming the gold Rubedo and the union of opposites. You've walked through the fire. You've stood in the whiteness. You've wept, listened, seen. And now the transformation begins. This is Rubedo, the reddening, the final stage of alchemy, where opposites are fused, where soul becomes substance, where gold is not a metaphor, but a presence within you. Rubedo is not relief, it is reconciliation. The shadow and the light, the wound and the wisdom, the human and the divine, all sit at the same table now. Jung saw Rubedo as the birth of the self, not the ego, not the persona, not the one who performs, pleases, or hides, but the essential you whole-rooted sacred. In Rubedo, you are no longer seeking completion from others. You are no longer rejecting your darkness. You are no longer running from death. You have integrated. You have accepted. You have remembered. This is not spiritual fantasy. It is embodied wholeness. Rubedo is the red stage because it is alive. It pulses. It bleeds. It moves in the bloodstream of your life. You don't just know who you are, you live it. In the way you speak, in the way you choose, in how you respond when you're triggered, in how you say no without fear, in how you love without losing yourself. You are no longer reacting to life. You are relating to it from the center. This stage brings union. The masculine and feminine energies reconcile. The inner child and inner elder hold hands. The outer world mirrors the inner order. It doesn't mean your life is perfect. It means your relationship with life has changed. You stop trying to escape it. You stop trying to win it. You start to inhabit it with full presence. Rubedo is not about transcendence. It's about incarnation, about bringing the sacred down into the soil of your daily life. You don't float, you root. So ask yourself, what in me has finally come together, not through force, but through integration? Where am I no longer afraid to show up as my whole self? What would it mean to live as if my inner gold is already real, already earned? Rubedo is the harvest, but not the end. It is the continuation with new clarity, new commitment, new embodiment. You don't become someone else. You become fully yourself. And that self shines not with performance, but with presence. Living the gold, how alchemy transforms daily life. Alchemy is not just theory. It is not a metaphor to admire. It is a lived process. Carl Jung didn't study ancient texts just to sound mystical. He studied them because they revealed something eternal, that deep healing changes not just your inner world, but how you live, how you love, how you show up when no one is watching. Because the real proof of transformation is not how much you've healed in your head, but how much you've changed in your life. When the alchemy is real, it reshapes your relationships. You no longer beg for validation. You no longer shrink for approval. You no longer chase what you haven't integrated. You meet people from presence, not need. You speak more truthfully. You listen without absorbing. You hold space not to fix, but to witness. Because you've walked through your own darkness. You've met your own shame. You've earned your own self. Now you no longer fear theirs. In your work, the fire of Nigredo burns away ambition without soul. The Albedo shows you what matters, and Rubedo invites you to create from essence, not ego. You stop trying to prove your worth. You start expressing your truth. You don't work to be enough. You work because something inside you is ready to give. This doesn't mean you leave your job. It means you bring more soul to it, more intention, more boundaries, more alignment. Because gold once discovered refuses to stay hidden. Even in creativity, alchemy changes everything. You no longer fear the blank page. You no longer chase trends. You create from the fire inside, the one that burned through you, the one that reassembled you. Your voice has depth now. Your story has roots. You don't write to impress. You speak to remember, to awaken, to resonate. Because what's been transmuted inside you wants to echo into the world. And in the most ordinary moments, morning coffee arguments, silent nights, the transformation lives on. You feel when the shadow returns. You know when the mask tightens. You catch yourself leaving presence. But now you return faster. You forgive sooner. You stay longer. Because wholeness isn't about avoiding mess, it's about moving through it with clarity. This is alchemy in real time. So ask yourself, how does my gold show up not just in insight, but in action? Where have I begun to live from integration, not reaction? What parts of my daily life are asking for more embodiment of the self? The goal of Jungian alchemy was never transcendence. It was incarnation, the divine made human, the soul made visible through how you walk, how you speak, how you love. This is the ultimate transformation, the sacred wound. How suffering becomes the soul's material. What if your pain wasn't a problem, but a process? What if your suffering wasn't a detour, but the very road the soul chose to bring you home? Carl Jung believed that suffering has meaning not because it feels good, but because it transforms you. And in the alchemical path, suffering is not an obstacle to enlightenment. It is the crucible, the place where raw experience is turned into wisdom, where wounds are not erased, but redeemed. We are trained to avoid pain, to fix it, escape it, ignore it. But in Jungian psychology, pain is not the enemy. It's the material, the base matter, the prima materia of the alchemist, the starting substance that holds the gold. Suffering in this view is symbolic fire. It heats the vessel, it dissolves the persona, it awakens what has been buried beneath years of protection. Your sadness has meaning. Your loneliness has depth. Your anger has intelligence. Your grief holds wisdom. You don't need to fear it. You need to work with it. When you're in pain, you're not broken. You're in the fire. Yes, it's dark. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it feels like loss. But if you can stay in it with presence, with compassion, something begins to change. You begin to see what's been unloved. You begin to hear the voice behind the silence. You begin to feel again, not for drama, but for truth. Pain becomes a doorway, a mirror, a passage. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." But the pain is not the destination. It is the invitation. It asks, will you listen to what you've avoided? Will you feel what was too much to feel before? Will you reclaim what you disowned in order to survive? These are not easy questions, but they are holy. Because the wound is where the light enters, not metaphorically, but psychologically. So ask yourself, what pain in my life still feels like a punishment? And what if it's a process? What am I willing to feel so I can finally release it? What sacred truth might be hiding beneath the surface of my suffering? In alchemy, the gold is never outside the fire. It is forged within it. And so is yourself, not by escaping suffering, but by transforming through it. This is the soul's work. This is inner alchemy. This is the beginning of rebirth. The universal descent archetypes, myth and the collective alchemy. You are not the first to suffer. You are not the first to burn. You are not the first to descend into the dark and emerge changed. Your story with its losses, its fire, its return is older than you. Carl Jung believed that behind every personal story, there is an archetypal pattern, a myth the soul is reliving. Not just for the individual, but for the collective. Because healing isn't just psychological, it's mythological. The alchemical stages, Nigredo, Albedo, Rubedo, are not just Jung's idea. They echo the great myths, Inanna, descending into the underworld, Persephone swallowed by Hades, Christ in the tomb before resurrection, the phoenix in ashes before flame. Each myth tells the same truth. Descent precedes renewal. The light is not born in avoidance. It rises through darkness. again and again in stories, in dreams, in us. Your descent is not failure. It is initiation into the mythic pattern of becoming. Jung believed we carry the collective unconscious within us, a deep psychic reservoir of symbols, fears, dreams, and archetypes shared by every human being who has ever lived. So when you suffer, you are not alone. You are participating in the great pattern. When you begin to heal, you're not just healing yourself, you're healing something ancestral. When you transform your pain into presence, you contribute to the archetypal unfolding of the self in the world. You become a vessel, a mirror, a myth made flesh. This is why Jung's psychology was never cold science. It was spiritual depth, a recognition that the soul is not a random byproduct, it's the very center of meaning. Your dreams matter, your symbols matter, your story matters, because they are universal and personal at the same time. You are not just living your life. You are living the life, the human journey that every soul must take when it chooses to wake up. Everyday alchemy rituals, practices, and the choice to live from the self. It's one thing to understand alchemy, to feel the stages, to name the pain. It's another to live it daily quietly when no one is watching. Carl Jung believed the self doesn't just emerge in deep inner work. It also lives in how you make tea, how you listen to a friend, how you speak to yourself when the old shame returns. Alchemy becomes real when it shows up in your rituals, in your relationships, in the way you return to presence again and again. This doesn't mean living mystically or perfectly. It means living intentionally, lighting a candle when the grief returns, journaling after a dream, naming your emotion before it controls you, pausing to breathe before responding, choosing to walk not to escape, but to reconnect. These are not small things. They are soul rituals, daily moments where you re-enter the vessel, where you choose to stay with yourself instead of abandoning what you feel. Creativity is one of the most sacred alchemical tools, not for fame, not for likes, but for integration. You paint not to impress, but to see. You write not to teach, but to remember. You speak not to convince, but to honor what you know deep inside. Every act of creativity is a ritual of self-remembering. When you give form to what you feel, you turn chaos into clarity, pain into presence, darkness into dialogue. You become your own alchemist. Relationships too become sacred ground. You stop entering them to be rescued. You stop performing to stay safe. You begin showing up with wholeness, not need. You say what you mean. You ask for what you need. You let others be as they are without shrinking or inflating your own soul to match theirs. You no longer fear being alone because you are no longer a stranger to yourself. And above all, you begin to live by this question. Am I acting from the wound or from the self? The wound reacts. The self responds. The wound controls. The self creates. The wound protects. The self connects. You feel the difference in your body, your tone, your choices. And with time, you begin to choose presence over performance, reality over fantasy, wholeness over image. So ask yourself, what sacred habits keep me grounded in the self? Where do I still abandon my truth to feel safe or accepted? What would it look like to treat ordinary life as a vessel for ongoing transformation? Alchemy doesn't end with one revelation. It continues in your daily decisions. It unfolds in your smallest choices. Because every act of authenticity, every moment of real presence, is gold. The gold within. Living as an alchemist of the soul. You don't become gold all at once. You become gold again and again each time you face your shadow with compassion, each time you walk into fire without flinching, each time you choose truth over comfort, presence over performance, self over ego. This is the real alchemy, not ancient magic, but the quiet, sacred process of becoming who you are beneath the noise. Carl Jung didn't offer an escape. He offered a mirror. He knew the path would burn. He knew the ego would resist. He knew the self would wait. And he knew that deep inside you, beneath all masks and myths, was a center that could not be broken, only remembered. That center is the gold. It's not something you earn. It's something you uncover through descent, through fire, through patience. You may never feel finished, and that's okay, because the real gift is not arrival. It's the ability to return. Return to your truth when the world demands you forget. Return to your body when fear pulls you into reaction. Return to your soul when silence is the only voice left. This is individuation. This is integration. This is the alchemical devotion. Not to being perfect, but to being present. Not to fixing the world, but to bringing your whole self to it. So ask yourself, what gold have I already uncovered in my life? Where am I still afraid to enter the fire, and what might be waiting on the other side? What would it mean to live not as a seeker of perfection, but as a keeper of the sacred? The self is not a concept. It is your birthright. It is your compass. It is the gold that remains when everything else falls away. And now, you know the way back. You've walked the spiral through Nigredo, the breaking through Albedo, the clarity into Rubedo, the union, and out again into your real life, holding something holy. This is not the end. This is the beginning of devotion to your wholeness, to your presence, to your soul. Welcome, alchemist. Welcome home.